The alarm blared for the fourth time. I finally reached over and silenced it with a clumsy swipe, squinting at the red numbers that confirmed what I already knew. Late. Again. The word came out as a croak, my mouth dry from sleeping with it open. I stumbled out of bed, my foot catching in the twisted sheets. Monday mornings were always like this, a rush of regret for the weekend's indulgences. The promise to do better next week already forming and fading in the same thought. The coffee maker gurgled to life as I fumbled with buttons, my eyes still half closed. I had exactly 27 minutes to shower, dress, and get out the door if I wanted to make it to the Henderson presentation. 27 minutes to transform from sleep-deprived mess to competent professional. The bathroom mirror confirmed what I suspected. I looked like hell. You've looked worse. I lied to my reflection, running wet fingers through my hair. The news played in the background as I buttoned my shirt. The anchor's cheerful voices discussing weekend sports and the weather forecast. Nothing important, nothing that couldn't wait. I grabbed my portfolio from the kitchen counter and reached for my coffee mug. That's when it happened. The first warning. The TV screen flickered, then went black. A harsh tone cut through the apartment. 3 long beeps followed by silence. Then text appeared on the screen, white letters against a red background. As a monotone voice read the words, "Emergency alert. A nationwide curfew has been issued. All citizens must remain indoors from 8 p.m. until 6 a.m. until further notice." This is not a drill. I froze, coffee mug halfway to my lips. My first thought wasn't fear, but annoyance. A curfew? Today of all days? The Henderson presentation could make or break my quarter. And now I'd have to deal with whatever overblown crisis had prompted this inconvenience. The regular programming returned as abruptly as it had vanished. The news anchors continued as if nothing had happened. Moving on to traffic reports. No mention of the alert. No explanation. Probably a test of the system. I muttered, checking my watch. 21 minutes now. I sipped my coffee, then cursed as it sloshed over the rim, leaving a brown stain on my white shirt cuff. Perfect. 15 minutes later, I was in my car, portfolio on the passenger seat, a travel mug of fresh coffee in the cup holder. The radio played some pop song I didn't recognize. I turned it up, drowning out my thoughts about the presentation, the stain I tried to scrub from my cuff, and that strange emergency alert. The first thing I noticed was the traffic, or rather, the lack of it. Monday mornings were usually bumper to bumper from my apartment all the way downtown, but today the roads were nearly empty. I made it to the first intersection in record time, drumming my fingers on the steering wheel as I waited for the light to change. A woman stood on the corner, clutching her purse with both hands, her eyes darting around nervously. Our gazes met briefly before she looked away, hurrying across the street before the walk signal had even appeared. Something about her urgency made me uneasy. The radio cut out suddenly, that same trio of harsh beeps replacing the music. I expected another curfew announcement, but instead there was only silence, then static. Then the song resumed mid-chorus as if nothing had happened. I pulled into the office parking garage at 8:47 a.m. Still late, but not catastrophically so. The garage was half empty, which was unusual but convenient. I grabbed my things and headed for the elevator, mentally rehearsing my opening lines for the presentation. The office was quiet when I arrived. Too quiet. Mondays were usually a buzz of weekend stories, coffee runs, and the general chaos of people settling back into work mode. Today, several desks sat empty. Those who were present spoke in hushed tones, glancing up as I walked past. "Where is everyone?" I asked Diane, whose desk faced mine. She shrugged, not quite meeting my eyes. "Called in sick. I guess. There's something going around." She turned back to her computer, ending the conversation. The Henderson meeting was scheduled for 9:30. I had time to review my notes and maybe find a safety pin for my stained cuff. I headed to the break room for more coffee, finding Mark from accounting staring at his phone. "Everything okay?" I asked, reaching past him for a paper cup. He jumped slightly, then forced a smile. "Yeah, just checking in on my kids. School sent a message about early dismissal today. Something about a water main break." He pocketed his phone. "Henderson meeting's still on, as far as I know. Have you seen Sarah? She was supposed to bring the finalized numbers." Mark's expression tightened. "Called in, like half the department." By 9:15, the conference room was set up, but only 3 of the 7 team members had arrived. The Henderson representatives were due any minute, and Sarah still wasn't answering her phone. I felt a knot forming in my stomach that had nothing to do with the presentation. "They're not coming," Lisa from legal announced. Hanging up her phone, got a message from their office. "Emergency cancellation. No rescheduled date offered." The relief I felt was immediately replaced by concern. "Did they say why?" Lisa shook her head. "Just that all external meetings are suspended until further notice." Outside the conference room windows, I could see downtown. Something was off about the skyline, but I couldn't quite place what it was. There was movement on the streets below, people walking quickly, purposefully. A convoy of dark vehicles moved against the flow of traffic, heading north. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Not a call, but another emergency alert. Nationwide curfew update. All citizens advised to return to primary residences immediately. Remain indoors. Await further instructions. The others received it simultaneously. The chorus of alert tones filling the conference room. No one spoke. We all stared at our screens, then at each other. "I should get home," Mark said finally, already gathering his things. "My kids, go." I nodded. We all should. The office dissolved into quiet chaos as people collected belongings, made calls, shut down computers. I watched from the conference room, that uneasy feeling growing stronger. Through the windows, the sky seemed darker than it should be for morning. Not cloudy, just wrong. By the time I reached my car, the garage was nearly empty. I sat behind the wheel, hands gripping it tightly, suddenly reluctant to start driving. Something caught my eye, a flyer tucked under my windshield wiper. I hadn't noticed it before. I reached through the window and grabbed it. Handwritten in black marker, "They're lying. Don't go home. The curfew isn't for our protection." I crumpled it immediately, tossing it onto the floor of the passenger side. Some conspiracy nut, taking advantage of the situation. I started the car, tried to ignore how my hands trembled slightly. The radio came on automatically. Static. I pressed the seek button. More static across every station. I switched it off and drove in silence, joining the stream of cars all heading out of downtown. Night seemed to be falling already, though my dashboard clock read only 10:22 a.m. Street lights flickered on as I turned onto my street, hours before they normally would. My neighbors' houses looked battened down, curtains drawn, some with boards already appearing over windows. I pulled in my driveway, killed the engine, and sat there, listening to the tick of the cooling metal. In my pocket, my phone vibrated again, but it wasn't another emergency alert. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Don't trust the broadcasts. They're not trying to keep us in. They're trying to keep something else out." Through my windshield, I watched as the sun dimmed further, as if a cloud had passed over it. But there wasn't a cloud in the sky, just darkness, creeping in hours ahead of schedule. Just another Monday. I sat in my driveway for several minutes, staring at the text message from the unknown number. My thumb hovered over the block option. Another conspiracy theorist, probably mass texting random numbers. I deleted the message and got out of the car. The air felt different, heavier somehow, with an electric quality that reminded me of approaching thunderstorms. But the sky, though unnaturally dark, showed no clouds, just a uniform dimness, as if someone had turned down the brightness of the world. Inside my apartment, I dropped my keys on the counter and turned on the TV. Static greeted me on every channel except for one, an emergency broadcast screen showing the same message that had appeared earlier. Now, with an additional line, regular updates will be provided at the top of each hour. I checked my phone, 10:47 a.m., 13 minutes until the next update. I tried calling my sister in Boston, but the call wouldn't connect. A robotic voice informed me that all non-emergency calls are temporarily restricted. Email still worked, though sluggishly. I sent messages to my parents and sister. Are you seeing these alerts? What's happening in your area? I'm fine but confused. Each one took nearly a minute to send. The progress circle spinning endlessly before finally confirming delivery. While waiting for responses, I tried social media. Twitter loaded, but showed posts from yesterday and earlier, nothing recent. Facebook wouldn't load at all. News websites either timed out or showed their standard headlines from this morning, with no mention of any national emergency or curfew. The clock on the TV screen counted down to 11 a.m. Right on time, the screen changed, and a woman in a dark suit appeared behind a desk with the seal of the Department of Homeland Security visible on the wall behind her. Citizens of the United States, she began, her voice steady but tense. At 0600 hours Eastern Time, the President signed Executive Order 13988, establishing a temporary nationwide curfew in response to credible intelligence regarding potential coordinated terrorist activities. There is no immediate threat to public safety. These measures are precautionary. She continued with instructions: remain indoors during curfew hours. Report suspicious activities to a special hotline. Maintain at least 2 weeks' worth of essential supplies. Regular commerce would continue during daylight hours, though unnecessary travel was discouraged. Additional information will be provided as the situation develops. She concluded, the next update will be at 1,200 hours. The screen returned to the text message as she disappeared. No mention of the strange darkness. No explanation for the communications disruptions. No acknowledgement of how bizarre all of this was. I tried calling my boss, but got the same automated message about restricted lines. My email inbox remained empty, no responses yet. I walked to the window and peered through the blinds. The street was quiet. A few neighbors had returned home like me, their cars now parked in driveways. No one was outside. Down the block, I could see a police cruiser parked at the intersection, its lights off, just sitting there. Hunger finally drove me to the kitchen. As I made a sandwich, I tried to think rationally. Terrorist threat? Possible, I supposed, though the nationwide scale seemed unlikely. And it didn't explain the accelerated nightfall or communications blackout. Maybe those were separate issues, a solar event coinciding with the security situation. The landline rang, startling me enough that I dropped the knife I was holding. I didn't receive many calls on the apartment's built-in phone, which I kept mainly because it came with a lease. I approached it cautiously, half expecting another automated message or conspiracy theorist. Hello, I answered. Oh, thank God. My sister's voice came through, distant and breaking up. I've been trying your cell for an hour. Kate, the mobile networks are restricted. How did you get through on this line? Landlines still work for some reason. Listen, her voice cut out momentarily. In Boston too, military vehicles everywhere. Internet's barely, more static, saying it's terrorists. But that doesn't make sense. Tom says Tom was her husband, who worked for a defense contractor. What? Kate, you're breaking up. Not what they're saying. Something about containment zones. They're A loud burst of static drowned her out. When it cleared, she was mid-sentence. "Get out of the city if you can. Go to..." The line went dead. I stood frozen, the receiver still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. Containment zones? Get out of the city? My rational mind immediately started creating explanations. Tom wasn't in any official government position. He was probably just speculating. Kate had always been prone to anxiety. This was likely nothing more than a precautionary measure blown out of proportion by rumors and fear. Still, I tried calling her back. The line rang endlessly with no answer. I returned to the window. More cars had appeared on the street, some packed with luggage. Despite the official instructions to stay home, people were clearly leaving. The police cruiser was gone from the intersection. My laptop chimed with an incoming email. Not from my family, but from work. All employees are placed on administrative leave until further notice. Do not attempt to access office buildings or company servers remotely. Stand by for additional instructions. A movement outside caught my eye. A man in a business suit walked down the middle of the street, his gait stiff and purposeful. Something about the way he moved seemed off, too rigid, too direct. He stopped directly across from my apartment building and turned to face it. For a moment, I thought he was looking right at me, though I was partly concealed by the blinds. Then his head turned with mechanical precision, scanning each window of the building. After completing his survey, he continued walking, turning the corner without a single glance in any other direction. My phone vibrated with another emergency alert. Curfew advisory update, effective immediately. All citizens in zones 12 to 17 must evacuate to designated safe areas. Check local listings for your zone designation and evacuation center. I had no idea what zone I was in. I searched online, but found nothing. The TV still showed only the emergency message screen with no zone information. I checked my mailbox and building lobby for any official notices. Nothing. As dusk deepened into what looked like full night, despite the clock showing only 1:22 p.m., I noticed fewer cars passing by. Those that did move quickly, headlights cutting through the premature darkness. Twice I heard helicopters overhead, though I couldn't see them through the strange, murky sky. I tried Kate's landline again. This time, instead of ringing, I got an automated message. The number you have dialed has been temporarily disconnected. Please try again later. At my computer, I mapped out evacuation routes from the city, just in case. Kate's warning echoed in my mind, battling with my natural skepticism. I'd always prided myself on staying calm and rational. This was probably an overreaction to some specific security threat, amplified by communications problems and unusual weather phenomena. Yet I found myself filling a backpack with essentials, clothes, first aid kit, power bank, non-perishable food, just being prepared. I told myself. At 2 p.m., I noticed the power flicker just once, lights dimming momentarily before stabilizing. My internet connection dropped and didn't return. Cell service showed no bars. Through the eerie silence came a sound I couldn't immediately place, a mechanical whine that grew steadily louder. Looking out the window, I saw a convoy of military trucks moving slowly down the street. Men in uniform stood in the backs of some vehicles, while others were enclosed with no windows. They weren't Army or National Guard. Their uniforms were solid black with no visible insignia. As they passed beneath the streetlight near my window, one of the soldiers looked up. Even from a distance, I could see something was wrong with his face. It was blank, expressionless, but more than that, it seemed almost artificial, like a mannequin given life. The convoy passed, and silence returned, broken only by the sound of my own breathing, which had grown rapid without my noticing. The TV switched automatically to another update. This time, a different person delivered it, a man in military dress. His delivery was flat, almost robotic. Evacuation orders for zones 16 and 17 are rescinded. Citizens in these areas must shelter in place until further notice. Citizens in zones 12 to 15 must proceed to evacuation centers immediately. Failure to comply will result in severe penalties. Again, no information on how to determine my zone. As darkness continued to deepen outside, I realized I had a choice to make: stay put as originally instructed, or try to leave as Kate had suggested. Neither option felt right. Both felt like walking blindfolded into the unknown. My laptop, running on battery now, showed 2:47 p.m., not even 3 hours since I'd left work. It felt like days had passed. Through my window, the street lay empty and still under the artificial night. Something moved in the apartment below mine. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, pacing back and forth. Then voices, not in conversation, but speaking in unison, repeating the same phrases over and over. Too muffled to make out. I stepped back from the window, suddenly aware that I was visible to anyone looking in. With shaking hands, I closed the blinds completely and sat in the semi-darkness of my living room, listening to the synchronized voices below and the sound of my own doubt, growing louder by the minute. I must have fallen asleep on the couch. When I opened my eyes, my apartment was completely dark, my laptop dead beside me. For a moment, I thought it was the middle of the night, but the clock on my microwave glowed 5:17 a.m. Morning should have been breaking by now. I went to the window and cautiously parted the blinds. The street was bathed in an eerie twilight, not night, but certainly not dawn either. The sky had a muted purple-gray quality, like perpetual dusk. The synchronized voices from the apartment below had stopped. In fact, as I stood listening, I realized the entire building was utterly silent. No footsteps, no plumbing, no distant conversations or television sounds. Nothing. Power was still on, evidenced by my microwave clock and the functioning lights. But my internet remained down. Cell service showed a single bar now. Enough to try texting Kate. "Are you safe? Please respond with your location." It took nearly 5 minutes for the message to send, and I received no delivery confirmation. The TV still displayed the emergency broadcast screen, but the message had changed again. Mandatory evacuation. All citizens in zones 12, 14, and 15 must report to designated gathering points by 0900 hours today. Zone information will be distributed by local authorities. I'd seen no sign of any local authorities in my neighborhood. Growing frustrated, I decided to break the first rule and go outside. If evacuation was mandatory, I needed to know if I was in one of the affected zones. The air was unnaturally still as I stepped out of my building. No breeze, no distant traffic sounds, no birds. The silence was absolute and oppressive. Most of my neighbors' cars were gone, their apartments dark. At the end of the block, a military checkpoint had been established overnight. Concrete barriers narrowed the road, while a small prefabricated structure stood beside it. No personnel were visible. I approached cautiously, looking for posted information about the zones. The checkpoint booth was empty, its door hanging open. Maps and papers were scattered across the small desk inside, as if abandoned in a hurry. One document caught my eye, a city map with color-coded sections. My neighborhood was highlighted in red, labeled Zone 14, so I was supposed to evacuate. I checked my watch, 5:44 a.m. I had just over 3 hours to reach a designated gathering point, but nothing indicated where these were located. As I stood contemplating my next move, a vehicle approached from the other side of the checkpoint, a civilian SUV moving slowly with its headlights on full beam. It stopped at the barrier. After a moment, the driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out, looking around in confusion. clearly expecting to find someone manning the checkpoint. "Hello," I called out, walking toward her. She spun around, startled. "Oh, thank God, a person," she said. "Do you work here? Can you let me through?" "No, I live here. I'm just trying to figure out where we're supposed to evacuate to." Her face fell. "You too? I'm from Zone 12. They announced evac centers yesterday, but when I got there this morning, it was abandoned. No authorities, no transportation, nothing." "Have you seen anyone official at all?" I asked. "Military, police, anyone?" She shook her head. "Just those weird patrols last night. But they didn't stop or talk to anyone." She hesitated. "Something's not right. This doesn't feel like any emergency protocol I've ever heard of." We exchanged names. Hers was Michelle, and decided to search together for information or other people. The strange half-light made the city feel alien. We passed abandoned cars, some with doors left open, others neatly parked but covered in an unusual fine dust that I couldn't recall seeing before. Downtown was eerily deserted. The evacuation center Michelle had mentioned, the main sports arena, stood with its gates chained shut. No signs of it ever being prepared to receive evacuees. "I don't understand," she said, her voice echoing in the empty street. The alerts specifically said this was the gathering point for Zone 12. Something caught my eye, a symbol spray painted on the arena wall, a circle with a vertical line through it, and what looked like small notches around its circumference. I'd never seen it before, but it gave me an uneasy feeling. "Look," I pointed. "Does that mean anything to you?" Michelle stared at it. "No, but it's fresh. The paint's still shiny." As we continued our search, I noticed more of the same symbols appearing on buildings and street signs, some accompanied by strings of numbers. None of them were familiar city markings or standard emergency notifications. At exactly 7 a.m., every electronic billboard in the downtown area suddenly activated simultaneously. Instead of advertisements, they displayed the emergency alert message, but with new text. "Attention, the evacuation has been completed. All remaining citizens must shelter in place. Do not attempt to leave your designated zones." Michelle and I looked at each other in disbelief. "Completed?" she said. There was no evacuation. Distant engine sounds made us duck into a storefront doorway. A convoy of vehicles similar to the ones I'd seen yesterday passed by, but these moved more quickly, with purpose. In a lead vehicle, I caught a glimpse of the driver, perfectly still, eyes forward, wearing what looked like some kind of breathing apparatus. When they had passed, Michelle grabbed my arm. "Did you see their eyes? They weren't blinking." I had noticed, but hearing her confirm it made it more real, more terrifying. We decided to head back to our respective homes, agreeing to meet again tomorrow if communications remained down. As we walked, the false twilight began to shift, growing slightly brighter, though the sun remained invisible behind the uniform grayness above. The city should have been waking up, streets filling with commuters, but instead, the silence deepened. Even our footsteps seemed muffled, as if the air itself was absorbing sound. We passed a park where a flock of pigeons had always gathered. The benches stood empty, the ground bare. No birds, no squirrels, no insects. I couldn't remember when I'd last heard a bird call. "The animals are gone," Michelle whispered, noticing the same thing. "All of them." A sudden mechanical whirring made us freeze. Above us, a drone hovered, much smaller than commercial models, with an unusual configuration of components. Its camera swiveled toward us, focusing with deliberate precision. Without warning, it emitted a flash of blue light that swept over us. Michelle stumbled, grabbing her head. "Did you feel that?" she gasped. I had, a strange pressure behind my eyes, gone almost as quickly as it came. The drone hovered a moment longer, then zipped away, disappearing between buildings. I think it scanned us, I said, the realization bringing a new level of dread. By the time we reached the checkpoint near my apartment, Michelle was visibly shaken. "This isn't a normal emergency," she said. "Whatever's happening, the government either lost control or they're lying to us." I couldn't disagree. Nothing made sense. The contradictory alerts, the absence of actual evacuation procedures, the strange symbols, the missing animals, the unnatural darkness. We exchanged phone numbers, though neither of us was confident the networks would remain functional. As Michelle turned to continue toward her neighborhood, she paused. "Be careful inside your building. I've heard stories about people acting strangely, not themselves." "What do you mean?" "Just if your neighbors seem off, don't trust them. Don't let them in." With that cryptic warning, she hurried away. Back in my apartment, I found another emergency alert waiting on my phone. "All citizens, remain in your homes. Do not look at the sky between 2100 and 0500 hours. Close all blinds and curtains. This is for your safety. Don't look at the sky." The absurdity of the order struck me, yet the specificity was chilling. What could possibly be in the sky that we shouldn't see? I paced my apartment, increasingly aware of the silence surrounding me. The building felt abandoned, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that something was listening, waiting, watching. At noon, the TV changed to another update. This time, instead of a person, the screen showed only text. Scrolling slowly, "The national emergency continues. Cooperation is mandatory. Resistance is inadvisable. Witnesses to unauthorized phenomena should report for processing." The message repeated 3 times before returning to the standard alert screen. No explanation of what unauthorized phenomena might be, or what processing entailed. From somewhere nearby, I heard a sound that didn't belong, a rhythmic tapping, like Morse code. It seemed to be coming from the wall I shared with the neighboring apartment. 3 short taps, 3 long, 3 short, over and over. Almost against my will, I found myself moving to the wall, pressing my ear against it. The tapping continued, mechanical in its precision. Then, abruptly, it stopped. From the other side of the wall, a voice spoke, so close it could have been in the room with me. "They're coming tonight," it said flatly. "When the sky opens." I stumbled back. The voice hadn't belonged to my neighbor Mrs. Chun, who'd lived there for years. It was deep, androgynous, devoid of accent or emotion. Outside my window, in the never-ending twilight, a new sound gradually emerged, a low, steady hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It resonated through the walls, the floor, my own body, growing imperceptibly louder with each passing minute. The message on my phone glowed with renewed urgency. "Do not look at the sky." The ambient hum grew steadily throughout the afternoon, vibrating through everything: walls, furniture, my bones. My phone had died completely despite being fully charged that morning. The power remained on, but flickered with increasing frequency as the hours passed. I tried to ignore the voice from next door, tried to convince myself I'd imagined it, or that it was just Mrs. Chun playing a recording. But deep down, I knew better. Something was wrong with her, with everything. At 4:36 p.m., while I was inventorying my dwindling food supplies, someone knocked on my door. 3 sharp raps, evenly spaced. I froze, holding my breath. The knock came again, identical in rhythm and force. "Hello," I called, not moving toward the door. "Who is it?" "Emergency Management Authority," a male voice replied, perfectly neutral in tone. "Conducting wellness checks. Please open your door." I approached cautiously, looking through the peephole. A man in a dark uniform stood outside, his posture unnaturally stiff. The badge on his chest was unfamiliar, not police, not military, just a circular emblem similar to the symbols I'd seen downtown. "Can I see some identification?" I asked. The man held up a card, but it was blank, completely white. "Please open your door for wellness verification," he repeated, the cadence of his speech slightly off. "I'm Fine." I call through the door. "No assistance needed." He didn't move. "Non-compliance will be noted. Alternative measures will be implemented." A chill ran down my spine. I backed away from the door, keeping my eyes on the peephole. The man remained perfectly still for exactly 30 seconds, then turned with mechanical precision and moved to the next apartment. I rushed to my bedroom window, which offered a partial view of the building's entrance. 10 minutes later, I saw him exit, along with 3 others in identical uniforms. They moved in perfect synchronization, maintaining exactly the same distance from each other as they walked to a black van parked across the street. Before they entered the vehicle, all 4 looked up simultaneously. Directly at my window, I ducked back, heart pounding, unsure if they'd seen me. The TV flashed with a new alert. "Attention, Phase 2 protocols initiated. Collection teams have been dispatched to zones 12 to 17. Compliance is mandatory. Collection teams." The phrase sent ice through my veins, gathering supplies into my backpack. I made a decision. I couldn't stay here. I didn't know where to go, but anywhere seemed safer than waiting for collection. Evening was approaching according to the clock, though the light outside remained the same murky twilight. I packed essentials, pulled on a jacket, and headed for the fire escape. The main entrance would be too exposed. As I slipped out onto the metal landing, I was struck by how the ambient hum was louder outside, almost palpable now, like standing next to massive power lines. The street below appeared empty, but I moved quietly anyway, descending to the alley behind the building. I'd only made it a block when I heard the mechanical whirring of drones. 2 of them rounded the corner ahead, their blue scanning lights sweeping the street. I ducked into a recessed doorway, pressing myself against the wall, praying they wouldn't detect me. They passed without pause, continuing their patrol pattern. I waited 2 minutes, then resumed my escape, staying close to buildings, avoiding open spaces. The streets felt wrong underfoot, subtly but unmistakably. The pavement seemed to give slightly, like walking on firm rubber rather than concrete. And the buildings, had they always been this shape? The angles of intersections and corners seemed off somehow, as if the very geometry of the city had shifted. I reached the park where Michelle and I had noted the absence of animals. In the center stood a new structure that definitely hadn't been there this morning. A tall, black obelisk, seamless and matte, absorbing rather than reflecting the dim light. Around its base, small groups of people knelt in concentric circles, perfectly still, faces upturned toward its apex. I crouched behind a bench, watching in horror. None of them moved, not a twitch, not a breath visible in the cool air. Were they praying? Worshipping? Were they even still alive? A shrill electronic tone cut through the hum, emanating from the obelisk. Instantly, every kneeling figure rose in perfect unison and began walking, straight-backed, arms at their sides, toward the east side of the park. As they passed my hiding spot, I recognized one of them, the man from across the street who had stared at my building yesterday. His eyes were open but vacant, his face expressionless. None of them showed any awareness of each other or their surroundings. They moved like automatons, puppets on invisible strings. I waited until they were out of sight before continuing west, away from whatever had summoned them. The further I went, the more the city had transformed. Street signs displayed unfamiliar names. Buildings I didn't recognize stood where familiar landmarks should have been. Yet occasional glimpses of the old city remained. A storefront I knew, a distinctive lamp post, as if reality itself was becoming patchwork. After walking for what felt like hours, I found myself in a residential area I vaguely recognized from years ago. The steady hum had diminished slightly here, and the air felt less oppressive. Lights shone in some windows, not the harsh fluorescence that had become common elsewhere, but warm, yellowish glows. From one house, I heard voices, actual human voices, varying in pitch and tone, overlapping in natural conversation. I approached cautiously, desperate for normal human contact but wary of a trap. Through a gap in the curtains, I saw a group of about a dozen people gathered in a living room. Maps and papers were spread across tables and pinned to walls. A ham radio sat in the corner, operated by an older man with headphones. These weren't the blank-faced automatons I'd seen in the park. They gestured, argued, showed emotions. I knocked on the door before I could talk myself out of it. The voices inside immediately fell silent. Footsteps approached, and a small viewfinder in the door slid open. A pair of suspicious eyes examined me. "What's the frequency?" a woman's voice demanded. I stood confused. I don't know what that means. "Where did you come from?" the voice asked. "Apartment in Zone 14. I saw the collection teams and ran." The eyes studied me for a long moment. "Turn around slowly. Arms out." I complied. After a full rotation, the lock clicked, and the door opened just enough for me to slip inside. The woman who'd interrogated me, middle-aged, with short gray hair and alert eyes, quickly secured the door behind me. The group inside regarded me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. One man approached, shining a pen light into my eyes, examining my pupils. "Reaction normal," he reported. "No neural implants visible." "I'm not," I began, but the woman cut me off. "We have to be careful. They've started using infiltrators." She gestured to a chair. "Sit. Tell us how you found us." I didn't. I was just trying to get away from the collection teams. I sank into the chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. "What's happening? Were those things pretending to be people?" The group exchanged glances. An older man stepped forward. "We don't know exactly, but we've been tracking the changes since the first alert. It's not terrorism or any natural disaster. Something is replacing things, people, buildings, maybe reality itself." He pointed to a map on the wall, marked with red circles that spread outward from the city center like a ripple. "It started here 3 days ago. The changes spread out about 10 blocks every 12 hours. The alerts, the curfew, they're not protecting us. They're keeping us contained while it happens." The woman who'd let me in handed me a bottle of water. "I'm Rita. We're trying to stay ahead of whatever this is, moving west as the changes move east." I took a grateful sip. "My name's," I stopped, suddenly unable to remember. Panic rose in my chest. "My name is." I don't. The group's faces showed alarm. Rita grabbed my shoulders. "Focus. Where do you live? Where do you work?" I could picture my apartment, my office, but the names of streets, buildings, companies, they were gone, like words on the tip of my tongue that wouldn't materialize. "I can't remember." "Why can't I remember?" The man with the pen light approached again. "It's happening faster now. The memory erosion used to take days." "What does that mean?" I asked, fear gripping me. Rita's expression was grim. "It means the fracture is accelerating, and we need to move again. Tonight." On the far wall, a small TV played silently. The emergency broadcast screen suddenly changed to a new message. "Phase 3 initiated. Look to the sky at 2,100 hours for further instructions." But the previous alert said not to look at the sky. I pointed out. "Exactly," Rita said. The contradictions are intentional. They're trying to confuse us, divide us. Some people follow one order, some follow the other. A loud bang startled everyone. Something had struck the front door. Then another, harder this time, would around the lock. They found us. The radio operator whispered, "Rita, pull me up. Back door. Now, we have a rendezvous point." As we hurried through the house, I looked back. The door burst open, and 3 figures in black uniforms entered, the same blank-faced collectors I'd seen earlier. But this time, their faces were shifting, rippling like liquid, features rearranging themselves. "Don't look directly at them," Rita warned, pushing me forward. "Once they get your patterns, they can use them against you." We escaped into the night, joining the others who'd fled through various exits. Behind us, the house lights flickered wildly, then went dark as the hum that permeated everything rose to a painful pitch. Above us, through the perpetual twilight, a vertical line appeared in the sky, a crack in reality itself, widening with each passing second. I used to think skepticism was a strength. Pragmatism kept me grounded when others panicked over nothing. 4 days into this curfew, I'm no longer certain that questioning everything is helping me survive. The utility closet of this abandoned convenience store has become my temporary sanctuary. I've gathered supplies, bottled water, protein bars, batteries, all while trying to make sense of a world disintegrating around me. The small battery-powered radio beside me crackles with another emergency broadcast. The 4th today with completely different instructions. Citizens in zones 3 through 7 must proceed immediately to designated extraction points. This is not a drill. Government officials will verify your identity before evacuation. Remain calm and compliant. Do not attempt to bring personal belongings. Do not question extraction personnel. The voice pauses, then adds something new. Citizens Alex Mercer, Theodore Kane, Sasha Williams, and Diana Chin should report directly to Command Center Delta. My hand freezes midair. Alex Mercer, my name. They just broadcast my name nationally. My heart thunders against my ribs as I press myself deeper into the shadows. "Hello." The voice on the other end is hesitant. Female. I nearly jump out of my skin. A figure stands in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light of the store. Instinctively, I grab the closest weapon, a mop handle I'd broken earlier for precisely this purpose. "I heard the radio," she says. "I heard my name too. I'm Diana. Diana Chun." The broadcast mentioned her. She steps closer, hands raised in surrender. She's maybe mid-30s, wearing a stained lab coat over jeans and a sweater. Her eyes dart nervously around the small space. "Are you one of them?" I ask, not lowering my makeshift weapon. "One of who?" She looks genuinely confused. "I've been hiding in the pharmacy next door since yesterday. I heard your radio." I study her face for signs of the vacancy I've seen in the others, the hollow stare, the mechanical movements. She just looks exhausted and frightened. Reluctantly, I lower the mop handle. "I'm Alex." I admit. Her eyes widen. "They called your name too." It's not a question. "And Theodore Kane and Sasha Williams." I add. "Any idea who they are?" She shakes her head. "But I think we should find them." "Why would we do that?" I scoff. "So we can all be extracted together? Because we must have something in common." Diana insists. Something they want. The radio crackles again. This time, it's a different voice, deeper, authoritative. "This message is for all citizens currently evading collection. Your resistance indicates higher cognitive function. This makes you valuable. Report to any collection point within 24 hours for processing and preservation." Diana and I exchange looks. "Processing and preservation." She repeats flatly. "Sounds delightful." despite everything. I almost laugh. Finding someone else who questions this madness feels like discovering water in a desert. I was a virologist at Meridian Labs. Diana explains, settling against the wall opposite me. 4 days ago, everything was normal. I was running PCR tests, complaining about the cafeteria food. Then the alerts started. What were you working on? I asked. She hesitates. Nothing that explains this. Gene therapy applications. Standard research. Government funded, partially. Her eyes narrow. What do you do? Data analytics for a security firm. I reply. Pattern recognition in behavioral data sets. She nods slowly. Pattern recognition. We sit in silence for a moment. The implications hanging between us. Have you seen them? I finally ask. The collectors? Diana's face pales. Yesterday. Hazmat suits. But wrong somehow. Too tall. Movements too fluid. I know exactly what she means. I'd spotted them from my apartment window on the second day. Figures in white protective gear moving with an unnatural grace, leading lines of blank-faced citizens into unmarked vans. I think they're selecting people. I say, not randomly. There's criteria. The radio static breaks again. The message repeats, but this time ends differently. Diana Chun of Meridian Labs. Your research has been continued. Results are promising. Your expertise is requested for final implementation. Diana gasps, hand flying to her mouth. That's not possible. She whispers, my research was preliminary. Years from completion. A sound outside interrupts us. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Moving with perfect synchronization. Diana and I freeze. Barely breathing. The footsteps pause outside the convenience store. Then continue past. We need to find the others. Diana says once the sounds fade. Theodore and Sasha. I'm about to argue when my phone, dead for 2 days, suddenly illuminates. One notification. A text message from an unknown number with GPS coordinates and a message. 4 of 12 located. Meet at these coordinates. T. K. Theodore Kane. Diana whispers. Peering at my screen. Could be a trap. I counter. Everything could be a trap now. She replies. But staying alone is certain death. She's right, though I hate to admit it. We pack quickly, dividing supplies between us. As Diana checks the store for any approaching figures, I scan the street maps I collected. The coordinates point to a location about 3 miles north, an old subway station. As we prepare to leave, I notice something I hadn't before, a sheet of paper on the floor that wasn't there earlier. I pick it up carefully. It's a printout of what looks like a classified document, heavily redacted. Project Echo, Cognitive Resistance Assessment. Predicted skeptics, 12. Located, 4. Remaining, 8. Collection status, in progress. Diana. I call softly. Did you bring this? She looks at the paper, confused. No. What is it? I think we're being tested. I say slowly. Or hunted. Or both. The radio crackles one more time. Unprompted. The voice that emerges is eerily familiar. My own. Alex Mercer. Remember the pattern. You've seen this before in your work. The anomalies form a recognizable sequence. My blood runs cold. I've never recorded any messages. I've never spoken those words. We need to go. Diana urges, pulling at my arm. Now. Outside, the sky has taken on that strange purplish hue that's become the new normal. The streets are empty except for abandoned vehicles. In the distance, a collection team marches in perfect formation, leading a line of blank-faced civilians toward a large black vehicle. We move quickly through back alleys, following the route I've mapped out. Neither of us speaks much, both lost in our own questions. What connects us? What did my work in pattern recognition have to do with her virus research? Who are Theodore and Sasha? And how do they fit in? 2 blocks from our destination. We hear a scream. Human. Desperate. Diana grabs my arm, points to a side street where a collection is in progress. A woman struggles against 2 figures in hazmat suits while others stand in line. Faces empty, awaiting their turn. We should help her. Diana whispers. We can't. I reply, pulling her back. We'll end up like them. The woman stops, struggling suddenly, her body going rigid. Then, impossibly, she smiles and calmly joins the line. The collectors turn in unison, as if sensing our presence, their faceless masks oriented in our direction. Run, I hiss. We sprint the final blocks to the subway entrance. Hearts pounding. The station looks abandoned. Gates pulled down. No signs of life. I check the coordinates again. This is definitely the place. Hello. Diana calls softly into the darkness beyond the gate. A flashlight beam hits our faces, momentarily blinding us. Diana Chun, a male voice asks. Alex Mercer? Yes. Diana answers before I can stop her. The gate rattles upward, just enough for us to duck under. A man stands there tall, gaunt, with the haunted look we all share now. Beside him is a younger woman clutching a backpack. Theodore Kane. The man introduces himself. This is Sasha Williams. We've been waiting for you. Why? I demand. What connects us? Why are our names on their lists? Theodore's expression is grim. Because we all saw the patterns before anyone else. Because we all questioned the first alert when everyone else just obeyed. Sasha steps forward. And because, she adds quietly, we're the only ones who can still remember what the world was like before last Monday. Last Monday, Diana frowns. You mean 4 days ago? Theodore and Sasha exchange looks. No, Theodore says carefully. The first curfew alert came 3 weeks ago. They've just made you think it was 4 days. The ground seems to shift beneath my feet as the implications sink in. 3 weeks, but I remember everything, my apartment, my job, my life before the alerts. Don't I? A distant siren wails, followed by another emergency broadcast echoing through the empty streets above. Citizens of Zone 5, remain in your homes. The collection is for your safety. Compliance is mandatory. Resistance indicates defect. The 4 of us stand in silence. 12 strangers to each other, yet somehow connected. 12 skeptics in a world of believers. 12 problems in need of solving. What happens now? I ask. Theodore's expression is somber. Now we find the others. Before they find us. The subway tunnels stretch endlessly before us. A labyrinth of darkness, occasionally broken by Theodore's flashlight. We've been moving for hours, guided by Sasha's seemingly intuitive knowledge of the underground network. The air grows thicker the deeper we go, carrying a metallic tang that coats the back of my throat. How much further? Diana asks, voice barely above a whisper. Her lab coat is now wrapped around her waist, stained with the grime of our journey. Almost there, Sasha replies without turning. She's been the quietest of our group, speaking only when necessary. Something about her unnerves me. She seems too comfortable in this new reality, as if she'd been preparing for it all along. Theodore stops suddenly, raising a hand. Listen. At first, I hear nothing beyond our breathing and the distant drip of water. Then it comes a low, rhythmic humming that seems to emanate from the walls themselves. Not mechanical, not human, something else entirely. What is that? I ask, fighting to keep my voice steady. Resonance, Theodore says cryptically. They're scanning. Before I can ask what he means, the humming stops. My watch beeps. The display reads 3:17 p.m. I check the time against my phone, 9:43 a.m. Both devices have been in perfect sync just hours ago. Time slippage, Sasha notes. glancing at my wrist. It's getting worse. What the hell does that mean? I demand, frustration edging into my voice. Diana places a hand on my arm. It means we need to hurry. We continue our descent, eventually reaching an abandoned maintenance room that Sasha and Theodore have transformed into a makeshift shelter. Maps cover one wall, marked with red circles and crossing lines. A ham radio sits on a table surrounded by notebooks filled with densely written observations. Welcome to what's left of resistance, Theodore says without pride. Not much, but it's off their grid. So explain, I say, dropping my pack. What connects us? Why are we on their list? Sasha glances at Theodore, who nods. She turns to a small cabinet, pulls out 4 personnel files, and lays them on the table. Alex Mercer, data analyst specializing in behavioral pattern recognition. She recites, Diana Chun, virologist researching genetic adaptability. Theodore Kane, former DARPA engineer focused on quantum communications. Sasha Williams, theoretical physicist studying temporal mechanics. I stare at my file. It contains information not even my employer had: childhood medical records, psychological profiles, even transcripts of private conversations I'd had years ago. How did you get these? Diana asks, her face pale as she pages through her own file. They were waiting for us here. Theodore answers. Along with this, he unfolds a document, a classified memo dated 6 months ago. Project Echo, preliminary assessment. Predicted cognizant subjects post-transition, 12. Probability of resistance formation, 87%. Recommendation, preemptive identification and isolation. Post-transition. I read aloud. Transition to what? We don't know exactly, Theodore admits. But we think a deafening emergency alert cuts him off, broadcasting from both the ham radio and our phones simultaneously. Despite the lack of service this far underground, this is a mandatory directive from the Emergency Response Coalition. All citizens must submit to immediate processing. Resistance is evidence of cognitive contamination. The voice changes mid-broadcast, becoming distorted, overlapping with other voices speaking in unison. Theodore Kane, stop hiding. Your work has been completed without you. We are broadcasting from the quantum layer you theorized. Your proof of concept was correct. Theodore's face drains of color. The radio continues. Diana Chun, the adaptation sequence you identified is ahead of schedule. The hosts are ready. Diana backs away from the radio, shaking her head in denial. Sasha Williams, time is not behaving as you predicted. The collapse accelerates. Your equations were incomplete. Sasha doesn't react, merely watches the radio with detached curiosity. Alex Mercer, I brace myself. Your pattern recognition algorithms helped us identify the others. Thank you for your service. The broadcast ends. My legs give out, and I sink to the floor. That's not possible. I whisper. My work was theoretical, analyzing social media behavior to predict consumer trends. Nothing that could. Nothing like this. They repurposed all our research. Theodore says quietly. Parts of projects, fragments of theories, combined into something none of us would have created individually. Diana paces the small room. But what is happening up there? What is this transition? Theodore hesitates. We think they're preparing humanity for integration. Integration with what? I demand. Not what. Sasha interjects. When? They're not invaders from somewhere else. They're us from someone else. My head spins as I try to process her words. That's insane. Is it? She points to her file. Temporal mechanics. Alex, I was researching theoretical methods of moving consciousness across time. Theodore was developing quantum communication systems that could potentially transmit information outside normal space-time. Diana was studying how viruses could rapidly modify host genetics. And you created algorithms to identify meaningful patterns in seemingly random data. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. They used our own work against us. No, Theodore corrects. They used our work to make this possible. We laid the groundwork, unknowingly. A tremor shakes the room, dust raining from the ceiling. The lights flicker. In that moment of darkness, I see it, a brief, impossible shimmer in the air, like reality itself rippling. We need to move, Sasha announces. They found us. How? Diana asks. We're too deep for any tracking. They didn't track our location, Theodore says grimly. They tracked our time. We gather our essentials quickly. As I stuff supplies into my pack, I notice something on my arm, a strange geometric pattern of bruises that wasn't there before. I roll up my sleeve to reveal more intricate designs spreading across my skin. Theodore, I call, my voice shaking. What is this? He glances at my arm. Unsurprised. Temporal stigmata happens when you exist in multiple time streams simultaneously. He rolls up his own sleeve, revealing similar but more advanced patterns. Mine started 3 days ago, or 3 weeks. It's getting harder to tell. Another tremor, stronger this time. Part of the ceiling collapses, blocking our main exit. This way, Sasha directs, pointing to a narrow maintenance tunnel. It leads to the old control center. We might find answers there. As we crawl through the cramped passage, I feel my perception shift, moments stretching unnaturally, then compressing. I see Diana ahead of me, then somehow behind me without having passed. Theodore seems to flicker in and out of visibility. What's happening to us? I gasp. Time fracturing, Sasha explains calmly. The barriers between moments are thinning. We emerge into a cavernous control room filled with antiquated equipment. But something is wrong. Half the room appears decades newer, like 2 different time periods overlapping. Military-grade computers hum alongside vintage control panels. In the center stands a figure in what I first take to be a hazmat suit. As we approach, I realize my mistake. It's not wearing a suit. Its skin is simply that color. That texture, not human, never was. It turns toward us with fluid. Impossible gas. The remaining test subjects have arrived. It announces in a voice that seems to come from everywhere at once. Consciousness assessment commencing. Theodore steps forward. Who are you? What have you done? The figure tilts its head at an unnatural angle. We are what you become. We have done what was necessary for survival. Our survival? Diana asks. Our continuation. It corrects. Across all possible timelines. Beyond the figure, on a wall of monitors, I see footage of the world above, cities transformed, structures that defy physics, crowds of blank-faced humans moving in perfect synchronization. And in the sky above them all, a vast, impossible shape slowly taking form. This isn't an invasion, I whisper, finally understanding. It's evolution. The figure nods. The integration proceeds as calculated. Your awareness was anticipated. Alex Mercer, your resistance was quantified. Your acceptance is inevitable. As if to punctuate its statement, every emergency broadcast system in the control room activates simultaneously. Attention all remaining autonomous entities. The transition is now complete. Reality reconstruction commences in 5 minutes. Prepare for final integration. The figure extends a hand toward us, a gesture almost like an offering. Your choice is simple. It says, join the new order willingly, or be absorbed without your consciousness intact. I look at my companions, Diana trembling but defiant, Theodore calculating our non-existent options, Sasha strangely serene. I think of the world above, already lost. I think of my ordinary life, forever gone. And I realized there was never any real choice at all. 5 minutes came and went. The world didn't end. It transformed. We ran from the control room, from the entity that wore humanity like an ill-fitting suit. Theodore led us through maintenance tunnels that seemed to bend and shift around us. Time became elastic. Diana would speak, and her words would reach my ears seconds later. Sasha would sometimes appear ahead of us in the tunnel before physically passing us. Don't think about it too much, Theodore advised as I stumbled, disoriented by a moment where I saw my own back retreating ahead of me. Linear perception is breaking down. Focus on moving forward. Forward to where? I demanded. My voice echoed strangely, overlapping with itself. There's nowhere left to go. Up, he said simply. We need to see what we're dealing with now. After what felt like hours or minutes or days, we reached a maintenance ladder. Theodore climbed first, struggling with a rusted hatch. When it finally gave way, a different quality of light spilled down, not sunlight, not artificial, but something in between, with a pulsing, organic quality. One by one, we emerged into what had once been a city park. I say, had been, because what stretched before us now defied any urban planning logic I'd ever known. The trees remained, but they'd changed. Their bark now rippled with geometric patterns identical to the bruises spreading across my arm. Their branches curved upward at impossible angles, creating cathedral-like arches that somehow supported new structures. Buildings had been repurposed. Skyscrapers bent toward each other, their glass and steel flowing like liquid to form connections mid-air. What had been streets now undulated gently, as if breathing. And people, there were people, but they moved differently. Some walked in perfect synchronization, their steps creating rhythmic patterns across the warped pavement. Others stood motionless, heads tilted upward toward the changed sky. My God, Diana whispered beside me. What happened to them? Before anyone could answer, an emergency alert sounded, not from our devices, but from the air itself, as if reality had become a speaker. Phase 1 integration complete. Autonomous entities will be absorbed within 72 hours. Resistance is anatomically impossible. The voice was simultaneously one and many, a chorus of humanity speaking as a collective. They've been connected somehow, Sasha observed with clinical detachment. Neural integration across multiple individuals. Like a hive mind? I asked. Theodore shook his head. More complex than that. It's not just connecting existing minds. It's creating something new from them. A group of uniformed figures approached, military personnel, judging by their remnant insignia. But they moved with that same fluid grace as the entity in the control room. And their eyes reflected light like mirrors. We should hide, Diana urged, tugging at my sleeve. There's nowhere to hide anymore. Sasha replied calmly. Not in this reality. Strangely, the figures passed us without acknowledgement, continuing their patrol route. One turned its head directly toward me, its mirrored gaze sliding over me as if I were invisible. They can't see us, I realized aloud. Not yet, Theodore corrected. We're temporarily out of sync, probably a side effect of the control room's proximity to their technology. It won't last long. We move cautiously through the transformed park, witnessing the new reality taking shape around us. What struck me most wasn't the impossible architecture or the altered landscape, but the silence. No birds, no distant traffic, no human chatter, just the soft sound of synchronized breathing from the collected citizens and an occasional harmonic hum from the structures above. "Look," Diana pointed toward what had been downtown. At the city's center, a massive structure was forming, not being built, but growing, extending upward like a crystalline tree. Its surface rippled with the same patterns as the trees. "As my skin, their nexus point," Theodore murmured, "where they're anchoring to our timeline." As we watched, a beam of light, not quite light, something denser, more substantial, shot from the structure into the sky. The purplish clouds parted, revealing what lay beyond. I fell to my knees. The sky was gone. In its place was another world, inverted above us like a mirror image. Its alien landscape visible through a thinning membrane of reality. Massive entities moved across that other plane, their geometries incomprehensible to human perception. "This is insane," I whispered. "This can't be happening." "It's been happening for longer than we realize," Sasha said. "The alerts weren't the beginning. They were just when they stopped hiding it. We took shelter in a building that still maintained some of its original form, a library with walls now curved inward like cupped hands. Inside, the books remained, though many had transformed, their text rearranging continuously on living pages." Diana collapsed onto a reading chair that seemed to adjust itself to her body. "I can't process this," she said shakily. "Everything I know about biology, about evolution. This shouldn't be possible. Our understanding was incomplete." Theodore replied, examining his arm where the geometric bruising had spread further. "They've been manipulating our development for generations, guiding our research toward this convergence point." "But why?" I demanded. "What do they want?" "Survival," Sasha answered simply. "Their reality was dying. They found ours." I noticed something then, a subtle shift in Sasha's demeanor. While the rest of us were horrified, she seemed almost fascinated, accepting. "You knew," I accused suddenly. "You knew something like this was coming." She didn't deny it. "I saw patterns in my research that couldn't be explained by conventional physics, temporal anomalies that suggested something was leaking through. I tried to warn people." She laughed bitterly. "They called me delusional, pulled my funding. So I stopped trying to prevent it and started preparing to survive it instead." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Impossible, given there was no network. The screen displayed a message from an unknown number. "Alex, if you're reading this, you're experiencing Wednesday. I'm experiencing Friday. The time barriers are collapsing completely. Find me at the library. I've learned how to navigate the new reality." "Alex," my hands trembled as I showed the others. "I didn't send this." "Not yet," Theodore said grimly. Diana stood suddenly, moving to the window. "Something's happening." Outside, the synchronized citizens had stopped moving. As one, they tilted their heads upward toward the inverted world visible in the sky. Then, with perfect coordination, they began to change, their bodies elongating, skin taking on the same rippling patterns as the trees, the buildings. My arm. "The physical integration is accelerating," Sasha observed. The 5-minute warning wasn't for destruction. It was for rebirth. As if in confirmation, another emergency alert resonated through the air. Phase 2 integration initiating. Biological reconfiguration in progress. Surrender autonomy for painless transition. A strange sensation washed over me, a gentle pressure against my consciousness, like someone knocking politely on a door, waiting to be invited in. "Do you feel that?" I gasped. Diana nodded, pressing her hands to her temples. "It's in my head, asking to connect. Don't fight it directly," Sasha advised. Imagine mirrors in your mind. Reflecting it back. It can't force entry yet. It needs your consent or complete surrender. I followed her instructions, visualizing reflective barriers. The pressure receded slightly. "How do you know this works?" Theodore asked her suspiciously. "Because I've been resisting them for months," she replied. "They've been trying to recruit naturally receptive minds first. I was on their initial list before the public integration began." "And you never thought to warn us?" Diana demanded. "Would you have believed me?" Sasha countered. "Would anyone?" She had a point. Days ago, or was it weeks, I would have dismissed such warnings as paranoid conspiracy theories. Even now, part of me hoped this was an elaborate hallucination, that I'd wake up late for work, worried about spilled coffee and deadlines. Theodore approached a window, studying the transformed citizens outside. They're adapting to the new atmospheric conditions. Look how they're breathing now, synchronized inhalation every 30 seconds. I joined him at the window. He was right. The changing humans were breathing in perfect unison. Long pauses between deep inhalations. As I watched, I realized my own breathing had slowed automatically, my lungs fighting my conscious control to match their rhythm. "We're changing too," I said quietly. "Just slower. Resistance buys time, not immunity," Sasha confirmed. Unless what?" Diana pressed. Sasha's expression was unreadable. "Unless we find a nexus point at the right temporal junction. There might be a way to preserve our autonomy within the new system." "How?" I demanded. She turned to me, her eyes reflecting light strangely for just a moment. "Your future self seems to know. Perhaps you should find out." Outside, the purple light intensified as more beams connected our world to the inverted one above. The transformed citizens began moving again, converging on the crystalline structure at the city's center. Their movements were no longer human, but maintained a terrible grace, a preview of what we would all become. The choice before us was clear, even if the outcome wasn't. Find my future self and discover a way to preserve our humanity, or surrender to the new order reshaping reality around us. Either way, the world I knew was already gone. Emergency alerts were no longer necessary. The transition wasn't coming. It was here. Morning never came. The sky, if you could still call it that, remained fixed in its twilight state. The inverted world above growing increasingly detailed as the membrane between realities thinned. We spent what felt like hours in the library, though our watches disagreed wildly about the passage of time. Mine ran backward occasionally. Theodore's had stopped completely, frozen at 3:17. Diana's cycled through random times, the hands spinning erratically. Only Sasha seemed unconcerned with marking time. "It's a human construct anyway," she said when I mentioned it. "They're showing us that linear temporality is just one option. One option we happen to depend on," Diana countered. The virologist had grown increasingly agitated, constantly checking her pulse as if to reassure herself that at least her heartbeat still followed familiar patterns. "We need to move," I said finally. If my future self sent that message, I need to find me. Theodore examined the message on my phone again. "It says you're at the library, but clearly we're already here and you're not." "Different library," Sasha suggested, moving toward a shelf of warped books. She selected one whose pages flickered with moving text and opened it. Inside was a map of the city, not as it had been, but as it was now. The transformed landscape rendered in perfect detail. Landmarks labeled with symbols I didn't recognize. "How is this possible?" Diana asked, looking over Sasha's shoulder. "This book would have been printed months ago. Time isn't just breaking down," Sasha explained, tracing a finger along the page. "It's becoming malleable, recursive. This book has always contained this map, and never contained it until now. My head throbbed, trying to process her words. "There," I said, pointing to a structure on the map. "The Central Archives. The University Library. That's the biggest other library in the city." Theodore studied the map. "It's close to the nexus point. Dangerous territory. Everywhere is dangerous now," I argued. "But if there's any chance my future self knows something that can help us, we should split up," Sasha announced abruptly. We all stared at her. Temporal divergence increases our chances. If we're in different locations, experiencing different timelines, they can't track all variables. "That's ridiculous," Diana objected. "We're safer together." "Safer? Yes, but safety isn't the goal anymore," Sasha replied coolly. "Understanding is." Before we could argue further, a low vibration rumbled through the building. Books tumbled from shelves, and the floor undulated like the surface of water. Through the windows, we saw a new wave of change sweeping across the landscape, buildings and vegetation melting into new configurations, streets rearranging their patterns. "Phase 3, Sasha whispered, almost reverently. "Spatial reconfiguration." Theodore grabbed her arm. "How do you know these phases? What aren't you telling us?" She met his gaze unflinchingly. "I told you I was studied temporal mechanics. I've seen these patterns before, in theoretical models. The integration follows mathematical progressions. Consciousness first, then biology, then physical space, and finally..." "Finally what?" I demanded. "Temporal dissolution," she said softly, "when past, present, and future exist simultaneously." Another emergency alert resonated. Not broadcast, but somehow inherent in the air itself. "Phase 3 active. Spatial constraints removed. Navigate according to intention rather than direction." "What does that mean?" Diana asked, panic edging her voice. "It means the concept of distance is becoming optional," Theodore translated grimly. "Locations will connect based on thought patterns rather than physical proximity." "Then we need to focus," I said, surprised by the sudden clarity in my mind. "We need to hold the image of the Central Archives in our thoughts as we move." We gathered what supplies remained and prepared to leave our temporary sanctuary. Outside, the world had changed again. What had been streets were now flowing pathways that branched and merged seemingly at random. The transformed citizens moved along them with purpose, no longer walking but gliding, their elongated forms leaving trails of geometric patterns behind them. "Don't make eye contact," Theodore warned as we stepped outside. "The perception works differently now. Attention attracts attention." We moved cautiously, focusing collectively on our destination. The strange flowing pathways seemed to respond to our thoughts, stretching toward the direction we needed to go. Distances compressed impossibly. Buildings that should have been blocks away suddenly loomed before us, then receded as our concentration wavered. "Keep thinking about the library," I reminded everyone as we navigated this fluid landscape. "Picture the Central Archives." As we progressed, I noticed my perception changing. The geometric patterns that had seemed so alien now revealed subtle structures, beautiful in their complexity. The breathing rhythm of the transformed citizens no longer seemed unnatural, but instead part of a larger, harmonious system. I found myself inadvertently synchronizing my steps with theirs. "Alex," Diana hissed, grabbing my arm. "You're drifting." I blinked, realizing I'd veered toward a group of the transformed. Their mirrored eyes had turned in my direction, sensing my momentary alignment with their patterns. I mumbled. "It's getting harder to resist. The patterns are seductive." Sasha acknowledged. "They're designed to draw us in." to make us see the beauty in surrender. Stay focused, Theodore urged, though I noticed his gaze lingering on the crystalline nexus structure that dominated the center of the city. It had grown larger, more complex, pulsing with energy that seemed to bend light around it. We were perhaps halfway to our destination when a collection team materialized directly in our path. 5 transformed beings still wearing the remnants of military uniforms. Unlike the others we'd encountered, these moved with clear purpose, their mirrored gaze fixing directly on us. "Run," Theodore shouted, but the word had barely left his mouth when the collectors were suddenly upon us, moving with impossible speed. One grabbed Diana's arm. Where it touched her, the geometric patterns on her skin spread rapidly, racing up toward her face. She screamed, a sound that fractured and echoed as if coming from multiple points in time simultaneously. Theodore lunged to help her, but another collector intercepted him, its elongated fingers wrapping around his throat. I tried to reach them, but the ground beneath me shifted, stretching the distance between us. "Alex," Sasha's voice cut through my panic. "Close your eyes and think of the archives." Now, desperately, I shut my eyes and focused every fiber of my being on the image of the central archives. The sounds of struggle faded. The ground lurched beneath me. When I opened my eyes, I was standing alone on the steps of a massive neoclassical building, the university library, somehow intact amidst the transformed landscape. "Diana, Theodore," I called out, spinning around frantically. There was no sign of them or the collectors. Only Sasha stood nearby, unnervingly calm. "They've been taken," she said simply. "Integrated. We have to go back." I insisted. "We have to help them. They're beyond help now," she replied. "Their consciousness will be preserved in the collective, but their autonomy is gone." Rage boiled up inside me. "You did this. You knew this would happen when you suggested splitting up." I calculated probabilities, she admitted without remorse. "Some of us needed to reach this point. The others were statistical necessities." I wanted to strike her, to scream, but another realization hit me. "You're one of them. You've already been changed." She smiled slightly. "Not exactly. I'm aligned. I see the necessity of what's happening. The destruction of humanity, the evolution of humanity." She corrected. "Look around you. Alex, the world was dying. Climate collapse, resource depletion, endless war. They arrived just in time to preserve what matters: consciousness, connection, continuation." Before I could respond, the doors of the archives swung open. A figure emerged that stopped me cold. It was me, but different, older somehow, with geometric patterns covering half my face, my eyes reflecting light like mirrors. "You made it," my future self said. "Good. We don't have much time." "What happened to you?" I asked, horrified. I accepted enough of the change to navigate the new systems. Future me explained. It was necessary to understand. Understand what? Future me held out a hand, revealing a small device pulsing with the same energy as the nexus point. That this was always going to happen. That the emergency alerts were never warnings, they were preparation. For what? For the moment humanity would transcend itself. Sasha answered. My future self nodded. They've been guiding our evolution for millennia. The alert system was the final phase, separating those who question from those who comply. I looked between them. These two people who seemed so accepting of the end of everything I knew. "So that's it? We just surrender?" "No," my future self said firmly. "We understand, and then we choose." As if to punctuate this statement, a final emergency alert resonated around us. Within us, Phase 4 initiated. Temporal unification commencing. All remaining autonomous entities, your moment of choice approaches. The sky membrane tore completely, and the other world poured into ours. Past, present, and future collapsed into a single point of understanding. And I finally saw the full truth of what we were becoming. The rain fell upward. I watched it rise from puddles, ascending to a sky that hadn't been blue in days. It hung now as a bruised tapestry, purples and greens swirling in nauseating patterns that defied meteorology. I stood in the middle of what used to be Lincoln Park, my feet sinking into soil that felt too warm, too alive. My phone hadn't worked properly in days, but I carried it anyway, a useless talisman from a world that was rapidly fading from memory. The emergency alert system had gone silent 18 hours ago. The absence of those mechanical tones felt more threatening than any message they had delivered. They're not broadcasting because they don't need to anymore. I whispered to no one. I had tried. God knows I had tried. After escaping the collectors at the transit center, I'd spent 36 hours moving between abandoned buildings, collecting any survivors I could find. Tried to warn them. Most were too far gone, their eyes reflecting something else looking back at me. The few who could still speak coherently couldn't agree on what day it was or how long the alerts had been happening. Time itself had become subjective. My left hand ached constantly now. The transformation had started 3 days earlier, a slight discoloration beneath the skin that had spread to cover my entire forearm. The flesh felt harder there, almost crystalline in texture. I kept it wrapped in torn fabric, not out of concern for infection. That concept seemed laughably trivial now, but because I couldn't stand to look at it. You're accepting it. Dr. Linden had told me yesterday, during our final conversation before she too disappeared. Your body understands what your mind still resists. I had met her huddled with 3 others in the basement of an abandoned hospital, surrounded by makeshift Faraday cages constructed from window screens and copper wire. Her research notes covered the walls, equations and symbols that made my eyes hurt to look at directly. This isn't a crisis or an invasion, she had explained, voice trembling with the excitement of revelation rather than fear. It's a transition, the universe rewriting itself, adjusting its programming. I looked down at my raptor now. The fabric had begun to merge with the skin beneath, fibers and cells interweaving. I should have been terrified, but a strange calm had settled over me instead. I continued walking through the park, toward the city center. Buildings that had once been geometric and predictable now curved and twisted in ways that hurt to perceive directly. Windows reflected impossible angles, and doors opened to places that shouldn't exist within their frames. Yesterday, I'd seen an office building folding itself like origami, its steel and glass moving with organic fluidity. Near the central fountain, which now flowed with something thicker than water, I found a child's notebook. The pages contained drawings that started as normal childhood scribbles, houses, stick figures, the sun. But as I flipped through, the images evolved, becoming increasingly complex and disturbing. The final pages showed intricate, fractal patterns that no child could have conceived, let alone drawn. I pocketed the notebook and moved on. Downtown was quieter than it had been in days. The screaming had finally stopped, whether that meant everyone was gone or everyone had changed. I couldn't be sure. Probably both. Hello, I called out, my voice sounding flat and wrong in the altered acoustics of the street. Is anyone still? Still themselves? No answer came. Every doorway, every storm drain, the collectors had grown less subtle in their appearances. They no longer bothered with the hazmat suits and military vehicles. Now, they moved openly, elongated figures that flickered between human and something decidedly not. My phone vibrated suddenly, impossible, given that cellular networks had collapsed days ago. The screen displayed a single text message, Come home. Alex. Home. My apartment hadn't felt like home since the third day of alerts. I'd returned once to find my possessions rearranged into patterns that resembled the symbols that had appeared throughout the city. My journals filled with handwriting that was mine, but contained thoughts I'd never had. My mirrors reflecting someone almost, but not quite. Me. Still, I found my feet carrying me in that direction. The 20-minute walk took either hours or minutes. Time had become impossible to track. The sun remained fixed in its position, neither rising nor setting, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. My building looked remarkably intact compared to the surrounding structures. The front door swung open as I approached, though no one stood behind it. In the lobby, the furniture had been systematically disassembled and reassembled into a spiraling structure that reached to the ceiling. I recognized my neighbor's antique coffee table, serving as part of this impossible construction. The elevator doors opened without being called. Inside, where buttons for floors should have been, I found a smooth panel with a single depression the exact shape of my transformed left hand. I unwrapped the fabric-fused limb and pressed it against the panel. The sensation was neither pain nor pleasure, but something entirely new, a feeling for which human neurology had no reference point. The elevator moved, not up or down, but somehow sideways, through dimensions I couldn't comprehend. When the doors opened again, I faced not a hallway, but a vast chamber that couldn't possibly fit within the building's physical dimensions. Other people stood throughout the space, dozens of them, all former residents. Some I recognized, others were strangers. All stood motionless, their bodies in various stages of the same transformation affecting me. In the center of the chamber floated the last collector I had tried to capture, the one that had spoken to me in my mother's voice. It hovered several feet above the floor, its form shifting between humanoid and geometric abstraction. "You've been fighting the inevitable," it said, its voice now a composite of everyone I'd ever known. That resistance was expected, calculated for, part of the process. What process? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Emergence. It answered. Evolution. Ascension. Your language lacks the proper term. My transformed arm throbbed in response to its words. The crystalline pattern had spread past my shoulder now, reaching toward my heart. I no longer felt afraid of it. Why the alerts? I asked. Why the curfew? Why the deception? The collector's form pulsed. The transition requires order, structure. Your species responds to authority, to danger. The alerts weren't deception, they were preparation. Around the chamber, the other residents began to move in perfect synchronization, a choreographed dance that made patterns in four-dimensional space. And now, I asked, already knowing the answer. Now you choose, it said. Remain an observer, clinging to what was, or become a participant in what will be. My phone vibrated one final time. The screen displayed the emergency alert interface, but instead of a message, it showed a reflection of my face, transformed. Crystalline structures now framing my eyes, spreading across my cheeks. I looked up at the collector and my neighbors, at the impossible geometry of our new reality. I thought of Dr. Linden's last words to me, when extinction is inevitable. Transcendence is the only rational choice. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, extending my transformed arm toward the collector. The remaining human part of me whispered one final, quiet protest, but it was drowned out by the louder voice of resignation, of acceptance. The emergency had never been external. We were the emergency. We were the crisis. And now, we were the resolution. I surrendered to the inevitable and stopped running. There's a certain peace that comes with surrender, As my transformed hand met the collector's form, I expected pain or at least some dramatic flash of energy. The human mind always reaches for cinematic conclusions. Instead, there was only a gentle hum, like placing my palm against a sleeping cat. Time is the final illusion to shed, the collector said, its voice now indistinguishable from my own inner monologue. My consciousness expanded outward, no longer constrained by the boundaries of my skull. I could perceive the building in its entirety, not just the physical structure that had once housed apartments and lives, but what it had become, a nexus point, a fold in reality where dimensions intersected. What humans had once perceived as a 12-story residential building now served as an anchor securing something vast to our plane of existence. And I could see beyond. Past and future collapsed around me like a house of cards. I watched myself waking up on what I called Monday. Just 7 days ago, though days now seemed as quaint and arbitrary as measuring the ocean with a teaspoon. I observed myself noticing the first alert, dismissing it, spilling coffee on documents that had seemed so important then. You're experiencing temporal omniscience, the collector explained, though explanation was becoming unnecessary as understanding flooded through me. It's disorienting at first. Disorienting wasn't the word. I watched myself at age 8, scraping my knee on the playground. Simultaneously, I witnessed my birth, my death, and every moment between, not as memories or premonitions, but as experiences happening concurrently in a perpetual now. Was any of it real? I asked, my voice resonating differently now, vibrating with harmonic overtones that would have been inaudible to my former ears. Reality is consensus, the collector replied. What your species agreed upon was real enough for your purposes. Like children playing house before adulthood. The crystalline transformation had completed itself, spreading throughout my body until what had once been flesh was now something else, a lattice of living mathematics. Sacred geometry made incarnate. I could feel my consciousness distributed throughout this new form, no longer centered in a brain, but existing in every molecule, every atom, every quark, the others. I said, thinking of those I tried to warn, to save. Were they all like me? Every conscious entity experiences the transition uniquely. The collector said, some resist longer, others embrace it immediately. Some never complete the process. They become echoes, fragments caught between states. But all serve the purpose. Around us, the chamber had begun to pulse with rhythmic energy. My fellow residents, now fully transformed like me, moved in complex patterns that manipulated the fabric of space-time itself. I understood now that we were calibrating something, fine-tuning reality like musicians bringing an orchestra into perfect harmony. And the purpose? I asked, though the answer was already unfolding before me. Creation, said the collector. Destruction. Renewal. The universe ends and begins again. Improved each time. Your species calls it evolution, but that implies randomness. This is design. I turn my attention outward, beyond the building, beyond the city. The transformation I had undergone was happening everywhere. At different stages, some cities had fully transitioned. Others were still in the early phases of alertness and fear. The elaborate warning system, the emergency alerts that had seemed so ominous, had been merely stage one of a global metamorphosis. We were never meant to understand it. I said, the revelation washing over me. The human mind cannot comprehend its own transcendence. The caterpillar does not comprehend the butterfly. The collector agreed, yet the transformation occurs nonetheless. My perception continued expanding. I could see the entire planet now, glowing with the energy of billions of transformations in progress. from space. Earth looked like a jewel being faceted, its surface crystallizing into something new and impossibly complex. And then I understood my role. I'm to be a herald, I said. The collector's form shifted, becoming more like mine. You resisted longer than most. Questioned more deeply. Such minds are valuable for the transition phase. With perfect clarity, I saw my path backward and forward simultaneously. I would return to what humans perceived as the past, though in truth there was only the eternal present, the cosmic now in which all things existed at once. I would become part of the system that initiated the process. I would broadcast the alerts that my former self would hear. There's a symmetry to it, I observed. I become what I feared. Fear is the beginning of wisdom. The collector replied. Those who feared deeply also questioned deeply. My new form moved through the building without walking, shifting between spaces by thought alone. The other residents, no longer human, no longer separate individuals, acknowledged me as I passed. Our consciousnesses briefly touching, sharing experiences across multiple timelines. I emerged onto what had been a street, but was now a luminous pathway cutting through dimensions. The city had completed its transformation. Buildings now existing as mathematical concepts rather than physical structures. Where parks had been, gardens of light and thought bloomed, growing ideas instead of flowers. In the center of what had once been the main square stood a crystalline spire that pulsed with energy, the broadcast tower. Though broadcast seemed an inadequate term for what it actually did. It didn't transmit radio waves, but rather sent ripples through reality itself. Signals that resonated across time. I approached it, understanding my purpose completely now. The collector, my guide through transformation, followed. Though followed, implied a separation that no longer existed between us. It will seem cruel to them, I said, thinking of my former self and others like me who would experience the terror of not knowing, the desperate clinging to a reality that was already gone. Birth always appears violent from the outside, the collector said, yet it is necessary. I placed my transformed hand against the tower. My consciousness merged with its systems, gaining access to the emergency alert network that spanned what humans still perceived as the globe. In this moment, I existed everywhere the system reached, in every phone, every television, every radio. I selected the first message, the one that would begin the cycle anew. Simple words that would seem ominous, but ultimately inadequate to describe what was truly happening. Is there no other way? I asked, a final echo of my human doubt. This is not the first cycle. The collector replied, it will not be the last. Each iteration brings the universe closer to perfection. I nodded, accepting finally that resistance had never been possible, not because we lacked agency, but because what we were becoming had always been our destiny, written into the very code of existence. I cleared my throat, adjusted the microphone, and read the words I once feared. Emergency alert. A nationwide curfew has been issued. Remain indoors until further notice. Knowing that somewhere, I was just waking up, about to spill my coffee, and completely unaware that I had already become what I would fear. And the cycle began again.